Hello guys, David Vos here, and boy is it a beautiful day in Oklahoma, because I'm glad the rain stopped. Man, oh man, I thought we were going to drown. But yeah, there's still clouds up there, but it's a little sun coming out and things are looking up. Well, I want to talk today about one of my favorite subjects, something I'm very enthused about, as you might have seen in some of my videos. I was talking some months ago about planning a trip to go down the Green River and then get into Colorado and going down the Colorado River, going through the Grand Canyon. And I, don't like to say, and I don't really know what to say on here because I'm finding out it's probably illegal to go in and investigate a lot of these areas. Boy, I've been doing even more research, and man, I'm just getting information that is just blowing my mind. And guys, I'm almost, well, I wouldn't say I'm certain or anything because we don't know too much, in the world. We got to piece things together, but it looks like the evidence is mounting that this is real, and there is actually temples in the Grand Canyon area. There are holy areas. I mean, the archaeologists and paleontologists and whatever are saying that there are literally sites down there on the Grand Canyon, on the Colorado River, in the canyon there, that go back beyond 10,000 years, probably 12,000 years. And that's what, in my opinion, from my research, goes all the way back to the beginning of this particular present age that we live in. Or, that's 6 ages, but that's the entire age of mankind down at the bottom of the wheel. So that's a long time. And just before that was Atlantis. So I would say that these individuals that inhabited this area were the children of the Atlanteans. They may have gone underground because there was a great flood. There are lots of legends and so forth. But friends, there are so many things in that canyon, and there's a whole bunch of story and a bunch of backstory, and I want to try, and I know I can't do it justice in one video, but I want to talk about these things because it'll blow your mind to find out stuff that we've been lied to about. They've been hiding a lot of stuff. I've already gone and I've seen personally sacred sites that a lot of these places are in Arizona, New Mexico, or Colorado, and areas like that. And you've heard of Area 51, stuff like that. They're sacred. They don't even call it that. We call it that. But they put up these big barbed wire fences, and they don't allow you in, and there's signs. And I've seen it. It's like the Area 51. They patrol these areas with Black Hawk helicopters. They have government agents literally standing at the door guarding these areas. What I want to talk to you today about is the Ark of the Covenant and how it may actually be in the Grand Canyon. I'll give you the evidence as to why it is and where this particular place might be. Now, going back to around 1909, we find a story that I'd like to read to you guys here. I think that'll be the best way to do this rather than carry on with any kind of interlude or anything as we sometimes do. But let me just read you something here and we'll talk about it because it's very, very important, very, very mind-boggling to hear this story. It's fascinating is what I'm looking for. 1909, 2 men, one Professor S.A. Jordan and an explorer, G.E. Kincaid, just sometimes spelled Kincaid with a K. They were on the Colorado River inside the Grand Canyon. They spotted an opening in the rock wall pretty high up. They had to work pretty hard to get to it. But once they did manage to get inside, they saw things that blows the minds to this day. Most people would expect Native American artifacts, but these guys found a dugout maze of geometrically perfect tunnels, and they were filled with ancient artifacts, including mummies, a Buddhist shrine with plainly Egyptian hieroglyphs, boomerangs, and distinct metal objects was also mentioned. Jordan and Kincaid were both funded by the Smithsonian, our national museum. The Phoenix Gazette published its report as a front-page story on April the 5th, 1909. Many people were shocked, but even still, this huge find was just nonchalantly digested as if it was some amazing, magnificent find, but just something interesting. This was the changing from one age to the other, the age of the horse and smoke wagon to the age of the train and industry. Very exciting change indeed. And who really knew what they were looking at back then? We would like to think that a career explorer and an archaeologist, they would, but the Smithsonian denies to this day of ever knowing Kincaid and his associate professor Jordan. Kincaid claims at the time of the discovery that he has worked for the Smithsonian for 30 years up to the point as an explorer and a hunter. Mr. Kincaid's report. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. The entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall. It is located on government land and no visitor will be allowed there. Under penalty of trespass, the scientists wish to work unmolested without fear of archaeological discoveries being disturbed by curio or relic hunters. A trip there would be fruitless, and the visitor would definitely be sent on his way. The story of how I found the cavern has been related, but in a paragraph. I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for mineral, some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon. I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail to this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty, above a shelf which hid it from view from the river. Was the mouth of a cave. There are steps leading from the entrance some 30 yards to what was, at the time the cavern was inhabited, the level of the river. When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested. Securing my gun and went in during that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage until I came to the crypt in which I discovered the mummies. One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics which I carried down the Colorado to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. He even goes on to describe the passages. The main passage is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to about 9 feet toward the further end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first side passage branches off to the right and the left, along which on both sides are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today. Though some are 30 by 40 feet square, these are entered by oval-shaped doors and are ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by an engineer. The ceilings of many of the rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at a sharp angle from the main hall, but toward the rear, they gradually reach a right angle in direction. He also makes an interesting find. He describes as a cross hall several hundred feet long in which are found the idol or the image of the people's god, sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand. The cast of the face is oriental and is a carving of this cavern. The idol almost resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as to what religious worship it represents. He makes several other finds as well. A gray metal which puzzles the scientists for its identity has not been established, resembling platinum. Hieroglyphics on which he comments. On all the urns or walls over doorways and tablets of stone which were found by the image are the mysterious hieroglyphs, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes yet to discover. The engraving on the tablets probably has something to do with the religion of the people. Similar hieroglyphics have been found in southern Arizona. Among the pictorial writings, only 2 animals are found. One is a prehistoric type. A crypt. The tomb or crypt in which the mummies were found is one of the largest of the chambers, the walls slanting back at an angle of about 35 degrees. On these are tiers of mummies, each one occupying a separate hewn shelf. At the head of each is a small bench, on which is found copper cups and pieces of broken swords. Some of the mummies are covered with clay, and all are wrapped in bark fabric. The urns or cups on the lower tiers are crude, while as the higher shelves are reached, the urns are finer in design, showing a later stage of civilization. It is worthy of note that all the mummies that were examined so far have proved to be male, no children or females being buried there. This leads to the belief that the exterior section was the warrior barracks. Eerily, he also describes a place further inside, a place that gives everyone involved a very uneasy feeling. One thing I have not spoken of, may be of interest. There is one chamber of the passageway to which is not ventilated, and when we approached it, it had a deadly snaky smell. Our flashlight could not penetrate the gloom, and until stronger ones are available, we will not know what the chamber contains. Some say snakes, but others boo-hoo this idea and think it may contain deadly gas or chemicals used by the ancients. No sounds are heard, but it smells snaky just the same. The whole underground installation gives one of shaky nerves the creeps. The gloom is like a weight on one's shoulders, and our flashlights and candles only make the darkness blacker. Imagination can revel in conjectures and ungodly daydreams back through the ages that have elapsed till the minds reel dizzily. Oh, buddy. Well, isn't that interesting? Well, you might think, oh, that's just some story. Well, it was published in the Gazette. Now, usually stories that are published in the Phoenix Gazette or some newspaper aren't fake. But you know, the fact that the Phoenix Gazette denies the whole story, said it was just a hoax, is a little odd. Now, of course, it could just be a hoax, I suppose. Maybe they just wrote it for a hoax. But there is tons of evidence, literally tons of evidence, that they're saying that because they don't want us to know. They were told not to publish it. And you know that that's going on. In many cases, the government is trying to hide things. And to this day, they're guarding the whole place. You can't get in there. Trust me, I know this. I was chased down by a Black Hawk helicopter because I went in looking around in one of these places. And all these sacred places are behind military fences, or they're in parks where they're monitored and you can't get in there. Let me read you some more here. Over this area is restricted airspace. The ground is illegal and treacherous to navigate. And all official reports about this form of Smithsonian and elsewhere have been censored, modified, nullified, or retracted. This still did not stop people from attempting to visit the parts of the canyon, or this part of the canyon. Many have been arrested. Some have died attempting to climb these sacred sites over the years. It has gotten to the point where the government feels it must have armed FBI agents guarding inside the entrance to the cave that is now known as Kincaids Cave. There is an artifact that somebody claims they have found. This Egyptian golden tablet was discovered in the depths of the tunnel city, led by way of Kincaids Cave. This tablet serves as a history book, including names that began with King Zaphenath coming to the Azatlan. That's where we get the word Aztec. It's supposed to come from that word. And there's a lot of verification for this. And information about his descendants, King Kion, coming to the Grand Canyon. These artifacts are also from Kincaids Cave. They are pure gold. And they are some of the only historical artifacts from the Grand Canyon on display at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. This obviously isn't all they found. Some of them were photographed and documented, but who knows what wasn't? What is the reason why other relics that have been found here are not on display? Well, we know the reason for that. So, here is the 1847 Disternal Treaty Map of Mexico and the American West. See how far north the Aztec area went? It used to be part of Mexico. Look at that Lake Cahula. The water was much higher. Did you know that all the monuments in the Grand Canyon are named after ancient pharaohs? This famous canyon in Arizona is actually an ancient array of pyramids. And the sites align with the same stars that the pyramids of Giza align with. The constellations of Orion. Now, we've talked about that over there in Egypt. The Nile River is to represent the Milky Way. And the Great Pyramids on one side of the river represent the three stars in Orion's belt. And we find this particular pattern in every culture. And as I said, if you saw Chrysler building in New York and you saw a Chrysler building in Chicago or Europe, you'd say there was a one world government. They had travel, they had communication around the world. Well, these great pyramids and this information, the religious teachings, are all around the world in every nation on the face of the earth. And there's a reason for that, because the ancient ones lived beyond 12,000 years ago, and they were an ancient, technologically advanced civilization. And it fell into darkness when we went into the bottom of the wheel. There was a long period of dark ages that we've been going through. And the coming of Christ 2,000 years ago was the beginning or the dawn of the age of enlightenment, when the sun rises on the horizon and goes to the top in the astrological ages. The pyramids of the Grand Canyon, its off-limit areas, and Egyptian relics. In a restricted area of the Grand Canyon, there are pyramids and caves full of hieroglyphs and Egyptian relics. Many people do not know about them, as this information has been suppressed by the federal government for about a century. The sky over this area is restricted airspace. The area surrounding this pyramid and cave on the ground is illegal and treacherous to navigate. And all official reports about this from the Smithsonian and elsewhere have been censored, modified, nullified, or retracted. There were many Egyptian relics that were discovered in Kincaids cave, one of which was a pure gold artifact for the Egyptian king named Kian. Kian, or Kaon, the relic is holding lotus flowers in both hands, native to Egypt. This was found in the first cross tunnel of the cave, which was in the exact same location as the shrines in the Valley of the Kings, tunnel cities. Before the kings of ancient Egypt began to build pyramids and above ground cities, it was found that Kian was a descendant of King Zaphenath in Egypt, who may have been Joseph in the Bible. This Egyptian golden tablet was also discovered in the depths of this tunnel city, led by way of Kincaids cave. This tablet serves as a history book, including names that began with King Zaphenath coming to Azatlan, and information about his descendant, King Kian, coming to the Grand Canyon. Well, guys, this guy's story is very interesting, but how could we believe it? Well, there's more testimony. They've erased this guy's name, so we don't know if he really existed, but he was in the newspaper, but it was a hoax. Well, there is some confirmation. Of course, he was hired by a guy named Powell. You ever heard of Lake Powell? Well, he was sent down there by the Smithsonian Institute to investigate all of this and sent by the government. So he was a real person, and he gives his own testimony. We have this. And this is what he said. I don't know why most people don't even pay attention to all of the testimony. They read some story somewhere where they say, oh, that was discredited, so we don't believe in that. Okay. But what about his superior and many others? Let's take a look at what they have to say. Powell says, in this canyon, great numbers of man-made caves are hollowed out. I first walked down a gorge to the left of a cliff and climbed to a bench of the cliff. There was a trail on the cliff bench that was deeply worn into the rock formation. Where the trail crossed some gulches, some steps had been cut. I could see no evidence that the trail had been traveled in a long time. I returned to our camp about 3 p.m. and the men had found more Egyptian hieroglyphs on the cliff walls near the cave. We explored the cave and found this shrine and other artifacts. That evening, I sent a team member to notify the Smithsonian Institute of our discovery. Oh, isn't that funny? The Smithsonian doesn't have any record of this. We continued to survey the canyon, and we discovered more Egyptian tunnel cities. I estimated in my report that I think upwards of 50,000 Egyptians had inhabited the Grand Canyon at one time. All right, so is there, where are we getting the story of Zaphenath, right? In this descendant of Joseph of the Bible who came to America. Well, look on your screen there. You'll see a guy. His name is Burroughs. Russell E. Burroughs. Huh? Very interesting name for a guy burrowing in the ground. But this guy claimed to find some artifacts. And there's a lot of controversy about this. But he found some stones and some ancient artifacts and some writings. And that's where some people say the story got started. Well, of course, some archaeologists and scientists have debunked him too, right? But the pesky little problem of all of these archaeological sites that have been found that keep adding more credence to every one of the other ones. And they all seem to dovetail and prove that something's going on. But take a look at what this guy has to say and what he found. This artifact that was removed from Burroughs Cave in Illinois, the artifact was identified as an artifact for King Zaphenath, who was Joseph in the Bible. The direction of the boat on King Zaphenath's crown is coming to Atlantean of Ophir, and it's now the United States. Wow. There's more evidence for this than you can imagine. I mean, nobody can put all this information in one video, and there's a lot of people that investigate this and they just don't look into it. And of course, just like people who say, oh, well, we went to the moon, well, the government said so. It's on television, so they believe it. But if you do the evidence, you'll find that they're hiding something here. King Zaphenath Paneah ruled Egypt from the temple of Ammon at Arvarus, Egypt for 48 years. King Zaphenath recorded 12 trips to Atlantean of Ophir. The Smithsonian archaeologists are aware of this information. You could say that somebody just makes this stuff up, They spend their whole lives trying to forge documents somewhere that they found under the ground or whatever. And it could happen, but this stuff doesn't look like forgery to most people. The sun of the right-hand symbol is on the bottom side of the copper artifact. Then the box above the symbol is the Hebrew symbol for the Ark of the Covenant. This is a strong indication that Zaphenath, or Joseph, ruled Egypt according to the Ten Commandments in the Bible. The sun of the right symbol on the right bottom corner is a Semitic symbol. The three diamonds are Egyptian symbols for the greatest wealth. This artifact is for King Zaphenath, the ruler of Egypt, who came to North America in 1744 BC. Then on the top is the symbol for Egypt. And then the umbrella shape means the umbrella empire of Egypt established by King Zaphenath. King Zaphenath wrote that he found another place for Egyptians to farm and mine when he was 36 years old. This date would be 1744 BC. Each Egyptian ruler had a separate hieroglyph symbol. This is the hieroglyph that King Zaphenath chose for himself, which was Shu, the crocodile. The same hieroglyph was found at Arvarus, Egypt, for King Zaphenath. King Zaphenath is holding the staff of the Lord. Then on the bottom right, which meant number 1, next above that is 1X. This gold artifact is the symbol for the first or the father. Then above the X is a diamond, which means the greatest wealth. Then above the X is another symbol, which is for the second or both lands of Egypt. Then above is the elongated symbol. The W symbol meant a large body of water, or the ocean, to get here. King Zaphenath was known to be a wise king in Egypt, and he knew that Shu, the crocodile symbol, was a more powerful symbol than the bird symbol, and that he would be worshipped as a very powerful deity by the Egyptians that were not of Semitic descent. Perhaps additional records are in order. Joseph was recorded as building the first large wooden boat that had sailed in Egypt. During 7-year drought, people flocked into Egypt, and there was simply not enough land by the Nile River to plant grain to feed these people. Joseph wrote that he found a better place for the Egyptians to farm and mine when he was 36 years old. And that was at the Ophir. Now, the Bible, scholars have been puzzled for years because the Bible talks about the gold of Ophir, but they're not really sure where it is. It was a distance in the Atlantis by the Hio, or the Ohio River, in Atlantean, or the Ophir. For security, he only let his descendants that became kings in Egypt know where the Ophir was located. Joseph recorded 12 trips to Ophir, and he grew grain at Ophir. Joseph mined for gold at Ophir to bring back to Egypt also. Azatlan of Ophir is now the United States, and the Ohio River is now the Mississippi River. That's probably where we get the word Ohio. But that's just information that you can find on the internet. And of course, it's just people's testimony. People lie. We don't know. But what you do with stuff like that is you look at it. You see if it makes any sense. And when you get a lot of people saying the same thing, and from different quarters, you have all these different things. Book of Mormon. You've got the Burroughs Cave. You've got testimony from the Native Americans. And, we can't even go into all the different testimony that we have. It's enough for me to think that there might be something to it all. So I have already been looking at some of these sites. I have literally, personally, with my own 2 feet, I have seen and witnessed places that are just absolutely amazing. And I know beyond any doubt that these people spoke a Phoenician type, Hebrew, Egyptian type language. They're very similar. There are definitely Hebrew-like hieroglyphic writings all throughout Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado, as well as other places. Also, as we said, down the Mississippi, which completely confirms things that the prophet Joseph Smith said. So I personally, I've done some videos about this. I mean, there are pyramids the size of the ones in Egypt over there on the Mississippi, just south of St. Louis. There's one. There's a park. You can go and look at it. They don't advertise these things. The Decalogue Stone that I personally have gone to and explored. It's beyond, you're not supposed to go there. It's inside of, you're not allowed in there. If they catch you, you'll be arrested and imprisoned and fined and everything else. I literally was chased down by a Black Hawk helicopter. So trust me, it's true. You don't want to go messing around in these things. And this is why I'm a little discouraged now, because I've been doing a little investigation. I've determined there's a very good possibility the Ark of the Covenant could be there. And there's a reason for that. I've found some indications in some historical writings that say that a son of Cleopatra, came over here whose name was Helios, with ships. And he may have had the Ark of the Covenant with him. I find that to be very interesting. Well, if the Ark of the Covenant is such a special relic, and of course what was in the Ark, right? Ancient writings and artifacts and so forth. It was not just because it was made of gold, but it held great significance. There certainly was a lot of gold with those ancient kings. And there were a lot of scrolls and ancient manuscripts. And I think that's probably, the golden plates are probably the thing that would be the most precious. And you see, I know our Father in heaven didn't leave us without knowing what's going on. We have testimony that we've had with us. We've had the scriptures. But for the last couple hundred years, we've been digging up a lot of stuff. And according to the prophecies, their words are coming up out of the dust, speaking, whispering out of the dust, and telling us as a testimony of the past. Our ancient history will become known again. And we've had all these great archaeological finds like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library and the Ugaritic texts and so forth. The Rosetta Stone. Many amazing manuscripts and texts have come to light. But I believe that at some point, remember we've talked about underneath the pyramids was a great labyrinth, and this went all the way down to underneath Heliopolis down in Egypt. Well, Herodotus writes about it, and that's where they had all the writings. So when the Greeks came down in 330, Alexander the Great, he just leveled Heliopolis to the ground. Many of the books were taken, and they rebuilt the temple and the library at Alexandria. But I don't believe they took them all. I don't believe they took 1/100th of them or a 1,000th of them. They're all down under the ground. And the great knights that were anointed to watch over and protect this information until the end of time, I believe they did so by taking them to certain places and caves. And there are custodians to this day that maybe they don't know exactly what's down there, but they've been told it's their job. It's been handed down. There may be, look, I am anxious to talk to some Native Americans in the Navajo or Hopi Indian tribes or others in that area, because I wish that perhaps someone of the Native Americans would listen to some of the things that I have to say. I'd like to have a joint effort with them, because as of right now, Grand Canyon's closed and most of the parks, and I don't think they're going to be opening again. And if they are ever opened, these caves, and this particular cave, Kincaids Cave, which I believe is where the Ark of the Covenant and stuff is, and I'll explain why, they have iron bars on them. You can't get in, and there are guards, federal agents, and I say military that is protecting these things. You can't get in there. And a lot of it, this sacred stuff, is on sacred, holy Native American ground. The Navajo reservation has a lot of this information that I'm looking for. The cave that I believe I know where the cave is. Kincaids Cave that he found, where he saw all this gold and the mummies and the Egyptian relics. And I think I know where it is, and I will show you here in just a second. We'll break it down where I believe that is. But as of right now, I can't go there. Because even if I could, you can go on a boat down there, but somebody sees your boat along the shore parked, and you're there for a few hours, they're going to be looking for you. They've got, it's patrolled by the air and drones. If they see you messing around down there, they'll come in and they'll arrest you. Now, maybe if you had camouflage and you really, really was sneaky and stuff, but the thing of it is all these caves that are known have already been either raided or, as I've said, if some of them have been raided, the gold have been taken. What the Smithsonian Institute did with a lot of that stuff, I don't know. Whether it was the most important stuff or whether the military came in or whether I'm sure that if that happened, just like in the ancient times, when the Greeks went down into Egypt, the priests rushed before they could level it and took all the most important, precious things and took them to places down where no one would ever know. And I think that is why, and so I think the Navajo Indians and the Hopi and different ancient individuals who were commissioned to protect these things probably are to this day. They're not saying a word, but there are certainly those who are protecting these things on Navajo land. I'm sure of that. And I would, if this video gets to anybody that may have any information on that and would like to talk to me, I would like to have a joint venture with you guys and tell you what I know, and I'd like to hear what you guys know, because my research and what you guys already know, because I think it's important that the world find this out. We're right now down to the wire, guys. We got to know the truth. We got to wake people up, because this evil, wicked system and the devil is about to destroy us all and keep us down to where we'll never wake up. And if it weren't for the Lord Jesus, who is going to bring this short on account of the chosen ones, I don't think we'd have a chance. It's to the point now we're just waiting for Jesus. But at some point, the Lord's going to open these things up from the ground. And I'm very fascinated with all this information. But this guy named Heliopolis was the son of Cleopatra. And as I've said in many of my videos, I believe this is Jesus. And his twin sister, Selena, was Mary Magdalene. And I believe that, the Augustus Caesar and those guys went in and tried to wipe these guys out, their true line. And they usurped it. Julius Caesar was the only real Caesar. And of course, his son, Little Caesar, Caesarion, which I think is Heliopolis. And I think that was his name. And I think that the Romans tried to kill everybody and get rid of them. And I think they probably killed Lazarus. And of course, the story of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus, which was the father of Mary Magdalene, which was his sister, so that was his stepfather. So I believe that, these guys were Ptolemies. These were pharaohs. They have great wealth. Mary Magdalene had great wealth down there at Alexandria. And the Greeks and the Romans didn't know about all that wealth down under the ground. They didn't know about all these passages and where they might have gone. And I believe they put them on a boat and they took them over to America. And I think there is evidence for that. But we're not going to go into that today because we don't have time. We're now at 40 minutes. And I haven't even got, to tell you the things I want to tell you about where I think this cave is. And I'm hesitant a little bit about telling people where this is because I think, well, of course, I don't know if it makes a difference because I don't really think that anybody who was out for no good or to hurt or to, I'm putting it into the Lord's hands. But I'm only putting this information out there because I'm not going to give an exact location, and I think it's too treacherous to go and find it anyway for most people. But I'm putting it out there to show that there is evidence for this. Now, Kincaid in his story says that he was going down the river. Of course, flowing down a river means going with the flow. And he says he found this cave, and he says it was 42 miles up the river from El Tovar, Crystal Canyon. Now, what's interesting is there is, by the way, look at that picture there. What is that? Hieroglyphic writings there in the Grand Canyon? I mean, who wrote that? That's interesting. I don't know what that is. But anyway, this happened in 1909. Now, it was just before 1909, so I think about 1905, that the El Tovar Hotel was built on the rim of the Grand Canyon. That is the only thing that Kincaid could possibly have meant by El Tovar. But what's puzzling is he says the Crystal Canyon of El Tovar. Well, there is no Crystal Canyon that we know of today, but in maps of that time, as well as maps today, there is a Crystal Creek. Now, I read somewhere where somebody thought that it might be that that's what he was talking about, but why does he say El Tovar? Because that's about 10 miles up the river, and that's quite a distance if we can't narrow it down between 10 miles. We got to go 42 miles from this Crystal Canyon. Or is it from the El Tovar? Well, the El Tovar is on the rim, not on the river. So do you follow the creek down to where that river or creek goes into the Colorado? If you did that, the only one we know, there's a Garden Creek or a Pipe Creek that goes in there. But that, he doesn't mention anything like that. He just says something about Crystal Canyon. So some speculate that he meant the Crystal Creek, which has a canyon as it comes down and empties into the Colorado. But what I found out doing my research is that from the Crystal Creek point, you can go up about 12 miles, and there is one canyon after the other that have to do with crystals. Rubies, sapphires, serpentine, and jade, and slate, even agate, different stones and crystals. So I think perhaps it's possible that when he said Crystal Canyon, he meant the entire canyon there that goes down the Colorado in that 10, 12 mile stretch. But again, that's vague. And if he meant that, then why did he say something about the El Tovar, which is another few miles down the river? Well, Crystal Creek is closer than Ruby Creek or the other crystals. And it is Crystal Creek. And he did say crystal. So the most likely spot to start then would be from where Crystal Creek goes in. There's some Crystal Creek rapids there. And if you start from there, by the way, look at that cedar, what's called Cedar Mountain. If that don't look like a pyramid, friends, I don't know. I mean, it may just be a mountain, but I'd like to go look at it. But you see, that's on, I think that might be on Navajo land. It is on Navajo land, and it's probably a sacred area, and that's why nobody has ever investigated this particular. I think most of those things, there's formations, rock formations, and mountain peaks that are called the Temple of Isis and Osiris and Buddha. Those were named that, by the way, at that same time, around 1900, 1875 to 1900, by the individuals in Powell's team, the explorer that went down there. Now, why did they name those mountains after Egyptian pharaohs and Buddhas and Zoroaster? Why did they name it? Just because it looked like temples? Well, maybe. But isn't it interesting that at that very same time, the Phoenix Gazette was saying that, hey, they'd found Buddha in a cave, and it was hieroglyphics from Egypt and mummies. Well, the word was out at that time. They all knew it. And people would stay there at the El Tovar hotel, and they could see from the window in the hotel, you could look right across the canyon and see the Crystal Canyon. So I think that he's talking about from the point somewhere between, and it's a wide stretch in there, but I suspect right around where Crystal Creek enters into the Colorado, you count 42 miles. But we don't know whether we should start at Crystal Creek, or he also mentioned El Tovar. Now that creek empties in about 10 miles up the road, or a few miles. If you start from El Tovar and go 42 miles, you come out at a place called Nanoquip. And it's called Nanoquip Granaries on the map. It looks like a little Mesa Verde in the cliffs, which is very enlightening for those of you who want to know what's this Mesa Verde thing, right? Some people think that they lived there. They were like little apartments. What, they were little midgets or something? They're just little areas up in the cliffs. And why would they be living way up there in the cliffs? Well, they got to climb up there like monkeys? Look, the water was much higher then, and those are granaries. And they had to keep their grain cool. The temperature was like 50 degrees. But that water ran at that level. It says that in Kincaids' letter. He talks about how the water was at that time, way back in those days, thousands of years ago. The water was way up there. The water is gorged out the river, the canyon, in that amount of years. It's thousands of years. It's just washed it away. So when they made those granaries way up there in the cliffs, like at Mesa Verde or anywhere else you see that, those were granaries. They had boats coming through. And there would be tribes from all around, and different tribes had different jobs because, you see, they were only slaves for the gods. The gods lived in some underground, city down under the earth. Yahweh, the God of the deep. And he wanted them to go out, and they all had different jobs. Some tribes were hunters, and some were farmers, and so forth. Well, they would all go to these sacred places and sacrifice to the gods, give a percentage, like taxes. And they'd have their big festivals, and they had to know when these festivals were. So they were astrologers and astronomers, and in the sky, not only could they read the stars to find out when to plant and when to harvest, therefore when to have their festivals, but also what to believe and how to worship the gods, and how they were to expect sacrifices and offerings. So, if you look in that area, you'll see that just like along the Nile, where they would use the Nile River to irrigate, and Joseph, would down there, and remember the big famine that they have in the Bible, and Joseph had these granaries, and he stored up the food, and there was a great famine. Well, this is exactly what they did here. So it does make sense that maybe Joseph came over here as well. Earlier, there's some records that we've dug up that said this may be the case. And he came over here, and they found rivers, and along the rivers they would irrigate their crops. And of course they had to have these granaries along the sides of the rivers. But the gods would eat some of it, and they would get to eat others. Now, there were certain delicacies they were not allowed to eat. They had to give it to the gods. Like when they butchered their animals, the fatty pieces, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and those parts of the animal, and the blood was given to the gods. It was forbidden for the ancient ones to eat those things because they were to give them as an offering to the Lord. Well, anyway, as I said, if you went 42 miles from the El Tovar Hotel, it's mentioned there. He said something about the El Tovar Hotel, but he said something about Crystal Creek. But if you go from there, you come out at this Nanoquip Granaries. What's interesting about that is that in Kincaids' description of going down into this ancient cave or this city, these tunnels, that led to these big rooms. He says there were granaries. They had granaries. Now think about it. If Kincaid was telling the truth, which we have we've got confirmation. He calls it the Marble Canyons, and everybody says that the Marble Canyons have many, many caves. Well, we've seen them. Go look at them right there. The Nano Keep granaries are cut into the caves. Look, you can't go in there now. Nobody goes and pokes around in there for the last 200 years. Back in 1900, the government took that place over and they made it a park, and now they got rangers running around. You're not allowed to go here or park there or do that. So we don't. And then the Navajo Indians, they've been watching over their land for a long time, and they don't let people running around on sacred ground. So nobody knows what's going on in there. But I'm telling you, how many granaries do you think there is within a mile or so? I mean, we said it could be there, or if you started a few miles back at the 98-mile marker on the river at Crystal Rapids, where the Crystal Creek runs into the Colorado. If you start there, you'd come out just a little ways past where the Little Colorado takes off. If you go just a little past that, there's a little rapids called the Kugnot or something. I can't remember how to pronounce it. But that would be about 42 miles from the Crystal Creek. So between the Little Colorado River and the Nano Keep granaries, to the right, on the east side of the river, is where this ancient cave would be. But since we already know there are granaries there, and those have to be, that's where they would be. They're going to, a great civilization needs water. They need food. And we can see them with our own eyes. They're still there. And it fits the description perfectly. So I think that if we were to go in and look at those granaries up there, now remember, they're thousands of years old. They're deteriorated. That's not the way they actually look. They had wood on the outside of those caves. All of that's rotted away and washed away, and there were gold around and plated and silver plated doors and ancient hard cedar wood and palaces. But all that's been raided and looted. But you see, the most precious things, like the documents, the writings. Remember, Native Americans don't have any writings. They have no history. Why? Because they had to hide it. Because the conquistadors came over. And there's so much we could get into, but we're now coming down to 53 minutes, and we're going to have to close this for the day. I would like to do more videos on this subject because I have a lot of information I'd like to share with you. But I believe that, now remember, the Nano Keep granaries are on the east side, or the west side of the river. And Kincaids said it was on the east side. So I suspect that was an entire village, an entire city there. And that, what we see there, the granaries, is only one part. Remember, Kincaids said there was a long tunnel that goes almost more than 3/4 of a mile back in there with these big rooms. And he hadn't investigated all of it. And so, obviously, he said one of the tunnels goes to the granaries. So there you go. I mean, unless there's another granary, then that's it. That's the granary. Although there could be other granaries. There may have been a much bigger complex of rooms and granaries, but I'm sure that it's within that area, somewhere between the Little Colorado River all the way up to that Nano Keep granaries. That is where, on the east side of the river, if you did some looking around, if you had the freedom to walk around and poke around, but that is Navajo Indian territory, and it's sacred ground. By the way, up on the cliff above that area that I think that cave would be found, above that, interestingly enough, the Navajo Indians have their tribal Grand Canyon tribal area. And you can't go in there without getting a permit. You can't go poking around and you can ask them. I guess you can find out if and they will maybe, give you a guided tour or whatever. But you're not going to go poking around out there. And they do have guards. But this is the spot, friends. And so I do think that because it is an area unparalleled in the world, this Grand Canyon. Let's face it, it's 3,000 feet down from the river. Well, it's more like 3,000 or 4,000 feet in some areas. It's very, very steep. The river is about 2,700 feet, and the top of the rim is about 6,000 feet. So it's about 3,000 feet. And these caves are somewhere about 2,000 feet from the river level. So and you can't see it from the river, according to Kincaids. So you can't, I've been on Google Earth looking. I can see pretty well with Google Earth, and I've seen a lot of different little things that I would like to be able to go and see, but I'd have to have permission. So, yeah, I may still go out to the park if it opens up, if they're allowing people in there and just look around, but I'm not, of course, going to be doing anything illegal in that area. But if I could get some permission, the Navajo individuals, and that's not like the government of the United States. I mean, if they are interested in sharing with the world these ancient secrets because they feel, as I do, that it's time, then please, I hope that they'll get a hold of me. I'd like to share with them because I have so much more to say. I can't get out in this video, but there are just reasons and historical reasons and the stories about the Egyptians who came over and who the Native Americans may have originally been, the Anasazi, the ancient ones, and no, because, it's terrible that the Native Americans and all Americans and all the world, that we've been slaves for so long. I believe now it's time that we wake up and we dig up this information and we find out who we really are, because they're trying to hide it from us. You see, the bad guys that took over, they probably forced us into some sort of ignorance. And I think that's why they're trying so hard now to create this one world government, because we're beginning to wake up. And so that's why they're coming up with the shot. They've got to do something to modify us. So they, put a little lead in our diet and some fluoride in our water and stuff like that so that we lose consciousness. But before that happens, we got to get together and do something, friends. So, I don't know. I think that if you were to go all the way down to the beginning where the Crystal Canyon starts, Ruby Canyon, Sapphire Canyon, if that's Crystal Canyon, then you might come out right around that little mountain called Cedar Mountain, which looks like that may be the Grand Temple. And there may be these tunnels that Kincaids found that he says they go back in and they're like spokes on a wheel and they go back in like a mile. Well, they may go even further. I imagine they all connect somewhere inside that mountain that you see, Cedar Mountain. And of course, this is my speculation, but something close to what I'm saying is true. There definitely are tunnels. There is an ancient civilization. Whether or not there are golden Buddhas under the ground and great golden manuscripts, we don't know. We have testimony that there is. I personally know. I have personally seen paleographic Hebrew written in the rocks in New Mexico. The entire Ten Commandments is written on the Decalogue stone near Los Lunas, New Mexico. And I saw that. And the government, of course, doesn't allow you in there, but I did see that. I do know that they found sarcophaguses. There's definitely pyramids along the Mississippi. There is no question. If you go to Peru and you look at those temples down there, they did the same thing. They terraced the mountains and they used the water from the river to water their crops. And then there were the granaries along the river where they would store them in places where they could stay cool. And they would trade. And they were central locations, trading areas where people would come and have their great festivals, and they would trade. They would offer their goods to one another and trade. They would give their offerings to their deities. They would celebrate, and they would sing songs and dance. And they had a good life. They depended on each other for their welfare. They didn't have to have wars because that was not in their interest to war and fight with one another. Because if you went and this tribe over here was, maybe they were hunters, and this tribe over here was growers, and these were basket makers, and these were weavers, or whatever that they did. Each of the tribes had different jobs. And if you just went over there and fought and wiped out one tribe, well, then you wouldn't have baskets that year, or you wouldn't have food, or you wouldn't have meat, or you wouldn't have vegetables, or whatever. So they worked together. It was a system that allowed them to work together. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. We'll get back to you again tomorrow. And, from time to time, we'll be talking about these things. I'm going to take and do a little trip to Arizona here as soon as I can. And who knows what we'll be discovering. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.